Hello, everybody. Welcome to the first OKL podcast regarding teams, how they did with drafting, and the new field. I'm going to be talking about the new field a little bit, but that is going to be at the end because I don't want to bore you guys. I want to get going strong here with the draft, just like my take on it, my personal take on how each team did drafting and stuff. But first, let's outline each of the teams. Okay, Resurgence will be Lucid and Doggy. Lucid owning, Doggy being the GM. Obviously, if you're wondering, I am Doggy, but I'll be referring to myself in third person to prevent any bias. But I will be explaining the draft from my perspective, obviously. And next we have the Dogs, with Bunny Baller at owner and Zadini at GM. Obviously, really experienced ownership there. I mean, you got Bunny Baller, he's been playing for a while. Zadini's been playing for a while. That's going to be a formidable team and opponent in the future. Next, we have the Strike with Mads at owner and Miguel at GM. Another very good team in the Strike. They'll provide a lot of competition and balance to the league. And lastly, with the Rhinos, we have Tumber and Aura, the one team without a 6-star in their ownership, which is Tumber at he might be a 2 or a 3. I think he's a 3. And Aura's probably also a 3. Not completely sure, but I'll get back on that when I check it, which I can just do right now. Let's take a look. Aura's a 2 and Tumber's a 3 for an update on that. But like I said, we're going to see how each team drafted. I mean, I was obviously there announcing it, so I did see each pick, but I'm still going to give my perspective on it because I did not give a rating at the time. I'm going to go off Zadini's ratings as well. Going to see how he rated those in comparison to my take on it. But let's get started here with the first pick of the draft, which went to the Strike of Mads and Miguel. And they decided to take MQV. And, I think this is a great pick. Just because not only is he a great outfielder in this new field, which is based on your outfield. Obviously, you need 5 outfield now. I think he'll be a good leader. I think they immediately promoted him to head coach. I mean, definitely using his leadership right there. I mean, that's a great pick if you just want him to be your head coach, want him to kind of hold up your team in that regard. And obviously, like I just said, he can play outfield very well. Great pick, especially for this first round. I believe he's been the first pick a lot of times. I mean, he's always in this draft. But like I said, it's a new chapter so he was the first ever pick of OKL, Chapter 2, Season 1. And with the second overall selection, the Dogs went with Accent. And I think this is a great pick. Zadini gave it an A-, and he also gave MQV a B, which is relatively agreeable. But Accent got an A-. And I completely agree with that, just because it's not the greatest pick. There were still a lot of good players on the board, but Accent himself, obviously a very good player. He can play outfield very well. He mains outfield, which is, again, what you need. That was my personal strategy with the draft. I just tried to get as many outfielders as I could, which is what each team probably should have went for, but yeah, we'll see that later on when I go over each of these picks. So Accent, it's a safe pick. Accent's a very safe pick. Not bad for this first round. I mean, second overall selection, you can't go wrong with Accent. You cannot go wrong with Accent. And with the third pick, which was Doggy Dog and Lucid's team, we went with Hazard. And this got an A from Zadini, the only A of the first round. Highest rating. No bragging rights. But actually, yes, definitely bragging rights. I'll be bragging about this. No, I won't. But okay. We went with Hazard because we just thought, this is the safest pick that we can go with. Hazard is a player who doesn't get suspended. He's usually at the games. He's very active, and obviously he's a great outfielder and pitcher, which is what we need. Because obviously, as you may or may not have known, there is pitching rest now, which is, I believe, if you pitch 2 innings, you must rest a game. If you pitch 4 innings, you must rest 2 games. And if you pitch 6 innings, which I doubt anybody will, you must rest 3 games. So Hazard is a very good pick. He can pitch, he can outfield. He really meets the team needs, and he's a leader in his own regards because he's been playing this for so long. He can obviously help the newer players. But moving on to the fourth overall selection, the Rhinos went with Miracle. And this didn't get a great rating from Zadini. It got a B. And I would probably have to agree with that because Miracle is a great player. He's a great contact kicker. He's a great fielder, but only downside, he plays infield. And I just feel like with these overall high selections, you've got to get outfielders, which the Rhinos did next because they had back-to-back picks. But Miracle is obviously, he is a great pick. He's a leader. He will probably be their head coach if he isn't already. I believe he is. If I'm not mistaken, he might be. May not be. Not sure. But he's a great leader. He knows what he's doing. He can kick very well in contact. However, we did have 3 combines, and he still makes contact. However, getting to the base is a little bit harder for him because I think he has to back up a little more. I could be mistaken, but what he used to do was come up and kick. You can't really do that anymore. Because it'll say you're too far in front. You can't come way up and kick anymore, which is what a lot of people used to do. So we're going to see how people adapt to that. Miracle is going to be one of those players that needs to adapt. But yeah, I mean, a great pick by the Rhinos here. Like, not bad considering their next pick as well. And moving on to their next pick, which was the 5th selection, they picked Xavier. And this is a phenomenal pick for the round. Zadini gave it a B+. I would even give it a little bit higher. Obviously not to Glaze, but Xavier has proven to be a really good owner for the Capybaras. He's a leader. He's an outfielder. And on top of this, he's a pitcher. So he can do pretty much everything you need. He's a legacy player. He's been around for years. I mean, he knows what he's doing. He's definitely a really good player for this team. And I do also believe he's a 4-star, which is a good star to have, obviously. Miracle is also probably a 4-star, but yeah. Moving on to the 6th overall selection, which was the Resurgence, and me and Lucid decided to pick Jordan. And, you know, at first glance, you may say, oh, that's high for Jordan. I mean, like, he's a really good player, but is that 6th overall selection too high for Jordan? And in my biased opinion, I would say no. In my unbiased opinion, from an outside perspective, I would probably say yes, but let me explain. Jordan has been one of the best outfielders these past couple seasons. Obviously, I had him on the Season 9 Dogs. He was just a great presence overall. He's a positive player. Ironically, his name is Positive Jordan. So yeah, he's a good player. He's a good personality on the team, and I just really like him being there. We got him mainly for his outfielding, obviously per the strategy of just drafting outfielders. That's what we went for. So I think Jordan here was a great pick. Not bad at all by me and Lucid here. Moving on to the 7th selection, the Dogs picked up Cal, and Zadini gave this an A-. I somewhat agree, just because if we look at the combines, Cal showed up to, I believe, every single one, if not 2 of the 3. And he looked great. I mean, on this new field, Cal is definitely going to emerge as one of the stars of the league. I mean, there's not really many bad things to say about him, other than he's not a main outfielder. I feel like he's definitely a 6, not 6-star. He's definitely a 3 or 4-star infielder. However, we haven't seen much of his outfielding just yet. I think he wants to convert to one, but we'll obviously hold on that and see how that goes for him. But yeah, not a bad pick at all. His kicking has looked great in the combines. I mean, definitely a solid pick for this stage of the draft. A lot of talent, so good pick overall. Don't really have too many bad things to say about that. And with the 8th selection, the strike went with Jaden. And obviously they have back-to-back picks, but going with Jaden here, in my opinion, is a very good pick because not only are you getting an outfielder, you're getting a pretty good player that doesn't get suspended, knows what he's doing, and has been there and done that. I mean, he was on the Season 10 Wolves, I believe, where they did beat our Waves. I was on that team. I was the GM of that team. They did beat us, but yeah, I mean, they couldn't have really done it without somebody like Jaden on their team. I mean, he's a lockdown outfielder. He knows what he's doing. As I just said, he does know what he's doing. And yeah, again, not too many bad things to say about that. Zadini gave it a B+. I agree with that. Was it the best pick for who was left? Probably not. But was it a solid pick that will probably help them in the future? Yes, it definitely was. And moving on to the 9th overall selection, again by the strike. They had back-to-back picks, like I said. they picked Lurk, and getting an A plus from Zadini here, I probably agree, but something we have to consider about a player like Lurk is, can he adapt to the new field? I mean, that's the question for literally everybody in the league right now, but I think that's especially relevant for Lurk because he's a player that is based on booting. And with the new kick speed, which I'll mention right now, the new kick speed is 0.75, which means that the bars are faster, it's harder to home run. So can a player like Lurk adapt to the new kick speed? We'll have to see. I mean, we've seen somebody like Goffred has definitely already adapted. He kicked a couple home runs in the combine, but can a player like Lurk adapt? We'll have to see. This is going to be a pick that we'll see the effects of later on in the season, possibly the preseason. And yeah, I mean, it's a pick where you can't really like exactly predict how good it is just yet. You're going to have to wait and see on that one because, yeah, he's going to have to adapt. And how well he can do that will determine the value of this pick. And all right, moving on. The next pick, which I just mentioned, was by the Dogs, and it's Goffred. He was a great player in what the old season 11 and chapter 1, what was of season 11. He was a great player. Another booter. I mean, it's the same deal as Lurk. Can he adapt to the new field? I believe I literally just said, yeah. He kicked a couple in the combine, so clearly he is adapting, but I mean, does that go with the Dog strategy? Zadini's more of a player that likes to straight, or likes straighting. He's kind of a manager that likes more straighting, so we're going to see how somebody like Goffred gels into that lineup. But yeah, I mean, not a bad pick. He gave it a B, and I agree with that. Completely agree. He's a good fielder in his own right, but I think he's more based on his hitting, and however good that booting is will be that value as well. He's very similar to Lurk. Yeah, he's very similar to Lurk. And the next pick, which was by my team, the 11th overall selection, is a very controversial pick for a lot of reasons. And I'll explain those reasons. It was Monkey Sandwich. And me and Zadini were talking. We decided, we don't think the 6-star, 1 6-star per team rule is exactly that good. We want to remove it. But we never publicly announced it to the owners, apparently. I thought we did. I really did think that we did announce that. But we didn't. And we picked Monkey Sandwich. We had to trade him instantly for Jer, which is also a really good player. So I believe it was a relatively fair trade, but this was a really controversial one. Monkey Sandwich falling this low is an incredible pick, regardless of how you put it. But he's another player where how will he adapt to the new field? He's an infielder. Infield has definitely been nerfed, but there are ways around that. Obviously, double jump is a thing. Even single jump is still a thing. Yeah. We'll see how infielders can adapt to the new one. Monkey Sandwich is one of those. Same with pitching. We'll see how his pitching is on the new field. So, yeah, only good things to say about Monkey Sandwich, but he's going to have to adapt. And next up, with the 12th overall selection, the Rhinos chose Azur. And I really do think this is a great pick. He's one of those outfielders that fell really low in the draft, considering that he was an outfielder. I mean, bottom 3rd round, it's not that low. He's the 12th overall selection, but I definitely think he's a player that could have went higher, could have went lower. Zadini gave it a B+. I would even bump that up to an A-. I mean, Azur has proven to be a great player, a great presence, usually shows up, doesn't get suspended. A good outfielder for any team that he's on. He's not much of a role player. We saw most of these role players fall later in the draft, but Azur can definitely emerge into a star in his own right on this new field. I'm sure he can. And yeah, moving on to the Rhinos' next pick, and it was Jer, who's now a Resurgence member. But, excuse me. Jer is now on the Resurgence, but I mean, falling this low, top 4th round, that's a great pick. Jer has proven to be a great player, a great contact kicker. He's another player who is an infielder with this new field, so we're going to see how he can do there. But in my personal opinion, this was a great pick. And next up is Cage Max. And this got a B- from Zadini. which I don't really agree with. I personally think, this is my biased opinion, Cage Max has proven to be a great outfielder, a great infielder. Wherever you need him, he can play. And even pitching, he can probably do that too. I heard he was a pretty good pitcher. So we're kind of getting the best of both worlds with fielding. And I've personally seen him kick these past few seasons, and he's looked nothing short of great at it. I mean, like, there's really not many bad things I can say about him. He's an all-around good player, and I'm really happy with this pick. The 15th overall selection was by the Dogs, and they decided to go with Oz. I was really debating between Cage Max and Oz, and the only reason I went with Cage Max was because I don't know how well Oz will adapt. Again, he's another booter. Can booters succeed with the new field? We have not seen that yet. It's a risk, because from what I've seen, he's been pre-kicking a lot. Pre-kicking has been very nerfed, so I just decided it's too much of a risk. If he's still available next round, of course we'll get him, but it's too much of a risk for this pick. And he's proven to be a great leader. The owner of that Cobras team in Season 10 who won, he did own that team, so he is an owner winner. But a great pick by the Dogs, regardless of whether he can adapt. Not bad at all. And moving on to the 16th selection, which was by the Strike, they decided to go with EJ. And this is a pretty controversial pick. Not as controversial as Sandwich, of course, but EJ is an infielder who can pitch. And my only concern with EJ is how good can his contact be with the new kicking, right? Because pitching's faster, and I think EJ and another player that's very similar is Dip. They both guess completely, and I just don't know if that's the strat on this new kicking update. I just don't know if that's the strat. I'm sure people like EJ and Dip will find a way to adapt, but as of now, this is a very risky pick that could turn into a great player, but we're going to have to test him out with the new update. And yeah, with the Strikes' next pick, they decided to take Smiley. And Smiley has proven to be a great player. He's really good at kicking, relatively good at kicking. And he was on the Season 9 Dogs. Wait, Season 10 Waves, my mistake. He was not on the Season 9 Dogs. And he was a great player on the Season 10 Waves before we had to sadly part ways with him. But I think it's still a good pick, but there were better players, in my opinion, still available. Even the 4 to 5 under him, I think could have easily went over him. But we're going to see how he does on the new update, once again with everybody. It's really hard to determine skill level now until we play like preseason plus maybe a few games into the season. That's when we'll see who the new superstars are, who the new relatively good players are, and who the new garbage cans are. But still a good pick. Smiley's a good player. He's a good presence. Not bad. With the next pick, the Dogs took Hayako. And personally, I think this is a fantastic pick. It got a B. I would even put it higher just because I personally saw Hayako in every combine, and he looked great. I mean, his kicking was fantastic in the new combine. I mean, it was he was really getting on base every time. He was definitely doing really good with that contact in the new update. I think despite his inactivity these past few seasons, I think he's going to find a new sense of activity, if you will, in this new one, just because he's definitely going to be a big part of this Dogs team. I can tell moving on in the future. And yeah, he's just going to be a big part of that Dogs team. I can already tell. Moving on to the 19th selection, my team, the Resurgence, decided to take Adon. And this is, again, a very risky pick. Adon has struggled in these past few seasons, but we decided to take a chance. We think on the new update, he can definitely stand out and become a good player, especially with a little bit of training on this new update. So we decided to take a good legacy player in Adon. He's been around. He knows what he's doing. He can play outfield if needed. So we decided to go with Adon. And moving on to the next pick, which Zadini did not like. I mean, he gave this one a C-, but the Rhinos went with Dip. And I sort of disagree. I still don't think it's the best pick in the world. I think it could have been rated a little bit higher, but yeah, Dip is a solid pick for this round. I mean, we're talking a pretty bottom round here. Let's see. I believe we're in the 5th round. And with this pick, obviously, I had to cut a little bit right there, but yeah. All right, with this next pick, the Rhinos went with Dip, and I think it's a pretty solid pick. I mean, it's not terrible. It could have been a little bit better. There were still really good players available, but we're gonna have to see how Dip adapts to this new update. I mean, there's really no way to tell just yet, but yeah, we're gonna see how Dip can adapt to this. Not a bad pick by any means. I mean, very, 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 very solid pick here, especially this late. We're talking bottom 5 for rounding here. Bottom 5th round. I mean, not terrible. He's a very good legacy player. He's been around. He knows what he's doing. So you can't go wrong with somebody like Dip here. You cannot go wrong. And with the 21st pick, the Rhinos had back-to-backs. They decided to take Arc. And again, I have nothing but good things to say about Arc. The only slight issue with Arc is maybe his activity. I mean, I didn't see him at any of the combines, but he's definitely a player that can stand out in the outfield. Obviously, once again, you need outfielders on this new update. And yeah, I just think it's a very safe pick. Like I said, maybe he'll struggle a little bit with activity here, but because he does play baseball, and it is coming to the baseball season, as I know I also play baseball. But yeah, it's definitely a good pick. Definitely a good pick here by the Rhinos. Coming up next is the Resurgence, my team, with the 22nd pick. We decided to take Ashley. And a few people said, Ashley's probably not going to play anymore, probably going a little inactive, but we decided it's late in the draft. We may as well take a chance on somebody like Ashley just because, good first baseman, good contact hitting. I mean, you can't really go wrong. You can't go wrong with somebody like Ashley. Proven to be pretty solid the past 3 seasons, and we're pretty happy with this pick. We're happy with it. The 23rd selection, the Dogs went with Stiz. And we saw Stiz in the WKC, World Kickball Classic. Stiz was a very solid player there. I'm assuming he has the role for the champion. But Stiz was a good player there. And, the Dogs just have to hope he can carry that into the season, because I personally think there were probably some better players available still, but the Dogs see something in Stiz that I just might not be seeing, and we'll have to see with time whether Stiz can live up to that pick or not. But I'm assuming the Dogs, Bunny Baller, and Zadini will put a little work into him and try to make him better and gel with their team. Next up is the 24th selection, the last pick of the 6th round by the Strike. They went with JoJo, who is a good player. He's a very solid player, especially this late in the draft. It's not a bad pick. It's a safe pick. They got a C+ from Zadini here. But you can't really go wrong with a player like JoJo. He can play outfield. He can play infield. He can really do whatever you need him to do, I would think. I mean, he was on my Season 7 Waves team. Fun fact, I believe that's where he started. And last season, I forgot where he was. I believe he ended up with the Capybaras in Season 10, not Season 11. I have no idea where he went in Season 11, but Season 10, he ended up with the Capybaras, a very good team there. So, yeah, we'll see what he does. We'll really just see what JoJo does here. Next up, 25th selection. Sorry for that little pause. We have Inglace with the Strikes back-to-back pick. And Inglace, obviously a great player. He's been very solid these past few seasons. Maybe a little bit of struggle with activity, but other than that, it's not a bad pick for this late in the round. I think they definitely picked a solid player here that can play outfield, infield, maybe even pitch, whatever you need. Again, my only concern with Inglace is can his kicking adapt to the new update, because I believe he did struggle with the faster pitching in the old game, but we'll see if he can get good with that fast pitching, which is going to be what he needs moving forwards in the season. But once again, I assume the Strike coaching staff will help him with that. With the 26th selection, the Dogs took Ver, which I personally think is a pretty good pick for this spot in the draft, not just because of skill. I also think Ver's a good leader, and he can definitely help coach their players, especially people like Hayako and Stiz. Ver can be a good presence for those types of players. We're really going to see how this one turns out because Ver was a player who sort of struggled all around with that old game, but old Chapter 1 game. But we're going to see if he can potentially adapt in the new update. I mean, you never know. With a lot of these players, you never know. It's really hard to determine stars, really anything. We're going to have to see who the good players are moving forwards. One of those could be Ver. We'll have to see with time. With the 27th selection, Resurgence, my team went with Mox. I think this is a great pick for this point in the round. This point in the draft, my mistake. Mox obviously struggles with activity. However, he is a good player in his own right. He's proven to be really good, especially for those capybaras in Season 10. He was a great player. Even in seasons past. He's been here since Season 1, first owner of the Hellhounds. I mean, he is a great player to have on your team, especially when he wants to be there and he's active. So, yeah. Moving on to the 28th overall selection, the Rhinos took Brandolinium, who I think is a good player. However, he does play that third base spot, so you have to think, how useful is your third baseman going to be with this new update? I mean, his kicking's good. He can definitely be used on the kicking side of things. However, like I just said, how is that? I mean, I don't know. I don't know how he is going to find a way to adapt for fielding, but his kicking is good, so they'll use him there. And with the that got messed up. With the 29th selection, the Rhinos took Potier. And this is a good pick. I mean, Potier's been a good role player these past few seasons. I mean, the only slight downside to Potier, if the field around him isn't good, he will probably also not be that good. But if you have a good field, he will gel in there perfectly fine, I would say. Doesn't get suspended. Good pick overall, especially for this last round. That's not bad in any way. The 30th selection, the Resurgence, my team took Finale, which I think is a pretty good pick considering he can play outfield, he can play infield. He's very active. He can really do whatever you need him to do. And his kicking will have to adapt to the new update, but I'm sure he can get there with some practice. I will personally help him if needed, but yeah, I mean, a good pick for this, especially third to last pick in the draft. Not too bad. With the 31st pick, the Dog selected Juke Cracker, who is a very risky pick, I will say. He does get suspended a lot. He is a player that is sort of inconsistent. He is relatively consistent, especially with those waves. He was very good for the short time he was here on the Season 10 waves. But you have to think, is he going to get suspended? If not, this will be a great pick. If he does, then unfortunate. But he's a great outfielder. He can adapt to the new update, I would assume. He does slide a lot, which you can't necessarily do on the new update, but I'm sure he'll find a way around that. And yeah, not a bad pick. It's a fairly safe pick, but it is very risky. It's a risky but safe pick, if that makes any sense. It probably doesn't. And with the last pick, Mr. Irrelevant here, we have Trevor, who instantly got released. So not much to say about him. He was just instantly released off that team. Yeah, I mean, not too much to say about him. I mean, it was unfortunate that he got released. They could have at least tried him, but yeah, I don't really know what to say about Trevor. And that was the draft. I think each team had a great draft. Every team filled up their outfield, filled up their infield. Some teams have better pitching staffs than others, but I think people can learn how to pitch on the new update. I mean, it's a new game. It's a new game. So we'll see how that goes. But now I'll get into the new field, which is what some people may have came here for. Let's get into the new field. So the new field is an 11v11, which is different because the old field had a 10v10. This is obviously 11 players on the field, which is in part to increase the retention from players, because with an increased roster cap of 20, you're going to need at least one more player on the field, and the new field provides another big change, which is the bouncing. I mean, we've seen in the combines, bouncing is random, and I feel like that randomness could potentially provide a pretty good challenge, especially for legacy players, because not everything is just going to be consistent anymore. You know, you have to adapt on the fly to inconsistent bounces. You have to read the bounces. You have to read bounces off the wall. There's a lot of things that you have to read now. And I just think that's going to increase the overall, you know, productivity of the game, because you got to think, I mean, these legacy players have to train now. If you're a legacy player and you don't train, you will not be the same player. And I personally have spent some time on this new field. It is a lot different. I mean, if I outfielded the way I did on the old game, it would not go too well. I'd miss pretty much every ball. But yeah, I don't want to make this longer than it has to be. I'm going to make another podcast later on. I just wanted to quickly mention the new field and how that may change the game. But anyways, thank you for watching, everybody. I think it's going to be a very competitive season with these four teams, four great super teams. And anyways, signing off, I will see everybody later. All right? I'll see everybody later. Have a great rest of your day.